We're not playing this shit. This shit is worse than nerfed Juggernaut for melee. I don't play Righteous Fire. Ask Pox about how that's going. But for melee builds in particular, we're not going to take Chieftain. We're still going to take Juggernaut. I'll explain why later. You might look at this Ascendancy and notice it got barely any changes in the patch notes and think, well, this is just... Ruthless is just a Chieftain meta now, for sure. Because there's no way they put an Ascendancy in the main game that's so bad for the main game that it's, like, even worse in Ruthless. But it is. Let's go over the facts. Everyone looks at this as the main reason to go Chieftain. This is what everyone talks about for Ruthless, because it gives res. Modifiers to fire res, also apply to cold and lightning res, so it gives you a bunch of free res. It frees up suffix pressure, quote unquote. The bigger thing with it, really, is it gives unaffected by Ignite. We can't knock that. We have to acknowledge delving is really important in Ruthless, so that's very high value. But the res itself, if this node was on a Witch, or a Shadow, or a Wraith, it would be huge on any of those classes, because over there in the tree, very hard to get res. Those are the kind of classes where you might be grinding for a bit in Act 10, in some nice area, to find more rare pieces to cap your res, because it gets a bit fiddly. Also the classes where you might consider taking a Lyra more, controversial subject. On a Marauder and Duelist area has so much res. I have done multiple leveling testing runs with Marauder. I've done it in the Gold event. I did it last League. I've done a couple more since then of like Duelist and Marauder, and I've never struggled to just naturally cap my res through gear I found plus stuff on the tree. You take you can take a Cloth and Chain. If you're going precise technique, you take Weathered Hunter. There's loads of little bits. There's Diamond Skin. It's really easy. Okay, maybe not really easy, but it's easy enough to mean that this node here loses a lot of value in Ruthless, because the value it gains is based on your ability to capitalize on lower suffix pressure. Hey, I can take some res out of my gear, and I can put it into something else. Great, we don't have a crafting bench. Our ability to just say, like, oh, instead of putting res on this gear, I can put this, is a lot lower, because we have to work with what we get. So it's something you can only see more value on like later on, which makes it not like as good for like being a starter. Max res, if you can find like a purity of whatever, a purity of fire it would be for this, it has to be purity of fire. Get a mod on your maybe body armor and like a shield. You can probably push to 90/90 with this. That's the one good thing about this. That's why, you know, this is over here, this is over here. This is a bit of a better node, but it only does something for elemental damage. We lost a lot from Determination being nerfed, and we're going to go over why Juggernaut is actually better in that case now later, but this only shores us up for elemental stuff. But the problem really is now the support gem nodes, because everyone talks about those being like, oh, that's good for Ruthless, we don't get as many support gems. Tower Forest Strengths being a separate thing, this was never good. This was always the worst Chieftain node. Unless they've seriously buffed it, I doubt it's going to be significant. You have to take a whole node for it still. And now Tukahama Wars Herald, this is nerfed. So we get level 20 Ancestral Call, we get level 1 Fist of War. Level 20 Ancestral Call, in the case, like, let's say we're thinking of going Bone Shatter or some other kind of strike. Maybe we're going to look into the other strike skills, maybe try to get a trauma support on them as well, see what we can do. But level 20 Ancestral Call doesn't give any, like, I don't think it gives much increased damage, if I'm remembering correctly. It just doesn't give, like, less damage. The problem with this is builds in this area can just take Call to Arms, it's one passive point, you go past it all the time, and run Ancestral Cry. So what this is doing is saying, hey, you could not do that, and you could just take Call to Arms and run Enduring Cry. So for strike builds, this might as well read, you get Enduring Cry. That's it. There's not much. I mean, maybe there's an Ignite. So I don't know how Infernal Cry works or stuff like that. Maybe you can do some funny hijinks with that. Maybe that opens up a little opportunity, but it's not terribly significant. We don't really need Ancestral Call. No one really runs it. We just run Ancestral Cry support, War Cry. It's It's comfy. It's fine. So for a whole ascendancy in Ruthless, what we're getting from this is like we get some res that we don't really need on a Marauder. The only good thing maybe is like we get unaffected by Ignite. We get to cap our max res. We can push that higher, and we get some mediocre gem stuff. Let's look at what happened to Juggernaut, because people are saying we shouldn't pick Juggernaut anymore. It used to be a great 3-point Andy kind of ascendancy where you can click three things that mean like, hey, I can hit everything, nothing can slow me down, and I gain 5 billion armor. They have gutted the ascendancy, but they've gutted most of the other ones, other nodes, and it's still better to pick in Ruthless than a lot of other options. Let's go over why. Again, this is for melee. I play melee builds. If you're Righteous Fire, your your mileage may vary. But for Undeniable, we lost a chunk of accuracy. We lost 500, and we lost whatever our strength rating was. It's now just 1 time strength rather than 2 times strength. So if you were trying to like scale into a build that wants to run like the Magnate, trying to find a Magnate and stuff, that would be like 400 strength potentially. A lot of other Juggernauts might be running like somewhere between 200 to 300. So this is anywhere from 700 to 900 flat accuracy lost. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but you can make up with that on the fastest tree, lose some cluster you are enjoying somewhere else, take Eagle Eye. I never took Eagle Eye before because it gives crit, and I go Precise Technique. No one cares about crit when you're Precise Technique, but the accuracy from Eagle Eye actually basically shores up this entire loss. It's a few points, but we can do it. It makes Precise Technique is still very much playable. You just have to actually invest in accuracy. You want to get a bit more on gear on top of that. But it's still probably the better option than going Resolute Technique, because unless you like live action role playing as Quinn and doing 0 damage, Precise Technique is too important for that. The significant boost it gives. Unstoppable no longer giving movement speed and cannot be stunned. This can be shored up with Unwavering Stance for 1 point. So okay, we've lost 5 points in our passive tree. It's not the end of the world so far for the mechanics that we wanted before. Losing the movement speed is a bit shite, and this makes me think that we won't be taking this node. I'll tell you why later, because we want freeze immunity and stuff, right? Well, we'll get that from somewhere else on a Juggernaut. Unflinching is interesting because it still gives +1 endurance charge. It just doesn't give them as quickly, but you can still get them just as easily. This ascendancy didn't do that much before anyway, because you could take Inexorable for a similar effect. Inexorable like gives you a chance to, when you're hit, to gain endurance charges, and this makes that chance like 50% you gain your max. So it's going to be pretty easy to sustain your endurance charges. Bet. Unyielding is garbage. We don't take that because it doesn't give increased damage anymore. No one cares about an ascendancy that just gives AoE. Unrelenting though is okay. It doesn't give Chaos Res anymore. That sucks. We love Chaos Res. Now we have a 4th point. This is the kind of area we want to think, can we make use of these endurance charge things, because endurance charges are nice for extra fizz reduction, and that also gives all res. Hey, look, it's even easier to cap res. This transforms your endurance charges basically to have like extra effect. You get more elemental resistances, you get more physical damage reduction. It's actually more now. It's gone up, and that's significant because just this alone, we don't have to take any endurance charges on tree. I wouldn't, to be honest, with like, it's hard to push past level 90 in Ruthless, it's hard to get those points. They can be better spent elsewhere, but it still gives you an extra 8% additional physical damage reduction. That's really nice. That's okay. And it gives you the 5% reduced elemental damage taken rather than 8%, but that's, again, the same number here. They didn't actually nerf this by half, which is really weird, because most of the other nodes in the Ascendancy changes got nerfed by half, and these got nerfed by less than half. Unbreakable got nerfed by less than half, and Unbreakable is now the best node in Ruthless. And the reason why is because Determination got nerfed. Determination used to give flat armor. Now it doesn't. Now getting armor on your gear is more important. This node, they didn't say it removed the fact that it still gives double armor from your body. That can be anywhere from 2 to 3k extra armor on a full armor body piece. That's insane. That's now absolutely insane in terms of like the armor that everyone else has access to versus the armor a Jug has access to, and they still get the bonus of applying to elemental damage. So we can't maybe push as much max res as a Chieftain, but we can get way more armor than them, way easier, and turn that armor into elemental damage reduction. And it's only like 5%, but like my current POB for a Shield Crush Juggernaut build I will try to get out eventually gets to about 80,000 armor without flasks. So 5% of that being applied to, and that's applied to the cold damage taken from hits after elemental res. So you get around 80% all res, 20% of the damage goes through, and then an additional, like, what? Can't do maths. There's 4,000 armor on this build is getting applied to that 20% of it's good. It might not save you from being one shot by Cirrus Meteor, but it's going to add up because most of the time you're taking damage in Ruthless. It's because we don't have movement skills. We take a lot more hits, smaller hits that add up. That's the bigger thing. So this node is the best node in Ruthless. I would like you could argue that the Pathfinder node that gives utility charges for your flasks when they're in use is also really good, but due to the lower monster density and slower speed of Ruthless, I don't think a Pathfinder can sustain flasks as much as people are saying. Untiring's hilariously like it's still like a Bone Shatter Jug would still have to take this, but a Bone Shatter Jug's gonna struggle. I think they're trying to kill Bone Shatter meta in Ruthless, and I like it because it opens up a lot more ideas of like, hey, let's use a strike skill that doesn't fucking kill us. This is really bad though, because we don't take increased life regeneration rate sources from many other things. So we rely on this a lot to juice that raw regen we get from the other parts of the passive. So that's really bad for Bone Shatter, because Bone Shatter could already struggle really easily with keeping itself alive once you start to scale your attack speed to a point where you're happy about it. Our ability to sustain trauma stacks is going to be lower, and it's going to be fiddly because we're naturally going to get to weapon speeds that will want to sustain higher levels of trauma stacks, and it gets messy quite quickly. Determination also not giving flat armor means we have to get that from other sources. I'm wondering if people going Bone Shatter might actually have to start running a one-handed shield and also taking this 8% additional physical damage reduction you can get from Unrelenting, so we go the Endurance Charge nodes. So, like, I think it's going to be a shield meta. Either way. Whether you're using a shield-based attack skill or not, shields are so much more valuable now because they can give you a big chunk of armor, and they can give you stuff like chance to avoid elemental ailments, which with stacked with other sources you can actually get to 100% chance to avoid elemental ailments. It's really good. But that's Juggernaut. So you can see on when we click Juggernaut as a melee attack build, we can still go Precise Technique. you can how the fuck do you go Precise Technique on a Chieftain? Like, I POB'd it, I was missing about 1,000 accuracy, and I was lost as to how I'm supposed to get that, because none of this stuff helps with that at all. I think Chieftain might be okay for some kind of Ignite-based melee build, but it's... you still only have 4 points, and the best use of Ignite for this build is this node, probably. Because the dev said the chance to explode, the explosion, even though it has a tiny chance, it's a bigger AoE, and because it deals 500% of their life, you can really scale a massive ignite of that. If you can find a Beric's ring that lets you chain ignites off things, that's a build. You might also need to find Val Breach though, and finding that in Ruthless sounds awful, but this is the most exciting thing, I think, for like tinkering around with stuff. This Ascendancy, I think it will see play in Ruthless for some interesting Ignite-based builds and shenanigans. Maybe there's some starters in there. Maybe Righteous Fire works well with this in Ruthless because maybe. I don't know. But for melee starters, this is not the way, for sure. Absolutely for sure. You still go Juggernaut, you go Precise Technique, you can still click Undeniable, Precise Technique, you'll have Precise Technique for a while, just take accuracy as and when you need it. I think maybe the plan is you take Unstoppable early on, just because you can click it and gain freeze immunity. Freeze immunity basically means you lose less experience because you can't deal with it really otherwise. Even with like a flask, it's hard to keep the uptime. But I think we save some regrets, and when we can do Eternal Lab, we drop this. Once we can get like elemental ailment immunity from another source, and then or freeze immunity from another source, we comfortably we take the endurance charge stuff. It sounds fine to me.